So you're doing a reading for someone, and then you pull a card, and it's the lust card. And part of you wants to tell the client how the lust card represents a reinterpretation of a cosmic horror that shows up in the apocalypse. But another part of you knows that if you do that, you might not see that client again. So what do you do? An amazing student of mine, Tillman, asked me, how do you bring the occult information into practical divination? I'm going to show you how. So when we're working with the esoteric tarot, especially with the Thoth deck, we have so much information about each card. And we actually have a lot of information to work with. And what I'm going to recommend you do is to deduce your own meanings of the cards based on your occult understanding of the cards. So, for example, let's say we pull the lust card. I'm going to ask the question, how can lust and Babylon and the beast and the Hebrew letter Teth, how can that appear in the day-to-day? Well, we know that Babylon is a whore of the apocalypse, but in this interpretation, in Crowley's interpretation, she is a divine whore that allows for everything. And in Crowley's mythology, going into the cup of Babylon is like a form of enlightenment and is actually a feeling of ecstasy. So we may say that this card can represent a singularity of sorts or a new awareness. Or we can say that this card is connected to passion, being that it is a card connected to magic and force and will, and it can represent losing yourself in your passion. So you might pull this card and say, okay, I can see that you're really passionate about something, and I can see you really focusing on that for the next month, and it brings you a lot of joy. And I can see in some ways you're like losing yourself in whatever it is, this thing that you love. Let's do another example. So let's say we pull the art card. Now, we know from, if you know the esoteric understanding of the Thoth art card, that we're talking about visita, the visiting the interior parts of the earth, and there you'll find the hidden stone, which is the Philosopher's stone. Now, that's going to sound like craziness to a client, but we can look at that and say, how can the Philosopher's stone show up in day-to-day life? Well, it's something that we look for, and the art card has general ideas of searching. Thinking about Sagittarius as the sign of searching and exploration and moving forward, we can say that, oh, it looks like you're searching for something. Did you lose something? Or it could be travel. Sagittarius is very connected with travel. We can also look at the Hebrew letter Samek and say, which means tent peg or prop or support, and say, oh, I see that you're providing support for someone. Now, this card also talks of alchemy and the fusing of opposites. So you can tell a client, oh, I see that you're bringing two parts of yourself together. Or I can see that you're maybe bringing two parts of your family together, or introducing friends, or finding a work and life balance. Let's use another example. I'm using the major cards because those are the ones that are kind of a lot more abstract. Another example would be the Hanged Man. So the Hanged Man represents this idea of redemption, or rather light descending into darkness in order to redeem it. Now, what the hell would that mean to a client in an actual reading, for yourself or for someone else? Well, you can look at that esoteric idea of the cross surmounting the triangle, this idea of redemption, and say something is going into something else to change it. Now, this is where you can use your intuition to get more specific about it, or you could say that you, the client, or who you're working with, is going into an area that is maybe unfamiliar or mysterious and bringing about a very positive change. Now, that's still very generic. How specific can we really get? Well, we can look at Hangman being associated with water and the letter Mem, which means water. And you can literally say, this card could be like, you need to drink more water, or it could be living by the sea, or it could be sports and things involving water, maybe travel by water. We also have in this card Intimations of Sacrifice. Crowley says specifically about this card that this is a method of attainment or awareness or a structure in mythology of the dying god. So what can the dying god represent in the day-to-day? Could represent a martyr, could represent somebody taking the fall. So maybe the client is taking the fall for somebody else in order to do some good, potentially. I remember once, this was actually one of my darkest moments in reading, I pulled the Wheel of Fortune of the Thoth deck for a client, and she refused to tell me the question, which was fine. Like, I'll answer a question that I don't know what the question is. And I saw three people this was the 3 figures on the Wheel of Fortune card, but they were all involved. It's just my intuition told me they were all involved in something very horrible, really, really dark. And so I told her, I was like, I see 3 people really involved, and I don't know what this really dark thing is, but they're all involved and they're kind of cycling around the, I guess, the consequences of something that happened. And she told me at the end that what she had asked was justice delivered for her son who was killed. And that was a pretty wild one. But that one, I was just getting a sense of the 3 figures. And so whatever message that had to come through me to get to her used my knowledge of the Wheel of Fortune and painted it in this other light for me to deliver that message. So that's another thing. Be flexible with the symbolism, especially with divination, because the intuition, the neshama, or your guides, however you want to look at it, they're going to use what you know to get the right message across. Let's look at adjustment. Okay, so adjustment. We know in an adjustment, and by the way, if you don't know this stuff and you want to know this stuff, you can check out my courses at TowerMysticismAcademy.com. But adjustment is the Harlequin, Crowley's Harlequin, and she represents a feminine manifestation of the Fool. So the Fool of the universe is the nothingness going into the everythingness, the void, the sunyata, maybe the Tao, and adjustment represents that hidden, mysterious God source nature manifesting itself through the process of balancing and counterbalancing. Now, what would that have to do with a reading? Well, counterbalancing, somebody finding balance, and also the idea of compensation. So we can pull this card and say, oh, it looks like you're adjusting something in your life, or maybe changing your priorities a little bit, or maybe finding balance. Or if we go into the astrology with Libra, we can say, oh, I can see that you're feeling more poised or more together. We can also say that as a harlequin is like a Renaissance jester, performer. Maybe someone's into performing, or maybe this is a trapeze artist, balanced on the toes. So there's really no limit to where you can go. But what I do recommend is that you take the occult information that you do know and really search for the hints of those things in everyday life. Because when we do that, not only are we increasing our, I want to say, syntax and vocabulary for divination, but we are in some ways doing another form of the great work, because as above, so below. So let me know your thoughts and let me know your questions. More information at TowerMysticismAcademy.com, and I will see you in another wormhole. Much love.